it's sad that we kind of have let this fascist political system overtake our country. Because, like you said, it's two major parties that have monopolized our political system, whether it be on the federal, national level or on the local level. We seem to only be forced to choose between the two.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The California Dream. I am your host, Darren Brown. So last weekend, I interviewed California gubernatorial candidate Nickolas Wildstar. And I'm going to play that interview for you in a few minutes. But first, I want to talk about some of the events of the past week or past week and a half. Now, these events occurred after this interview was recorded. So I didn't get an opportunity to ask about them, which I definitely would have done, especially given that our guest is a Black man and is very active in Black Lives Matter and movements against police brutality. But I will say this. This past week, we saw in the Derek Chauvin trial a very weak defense based largely on this old racist trope of the drugged up, uncontrollable, superhuman black body. We saw yet another unarmed black man killed at a traffic stop just a few miles from that trial. We saw a 13-year-old fatally shot in an encounter with police in Chicago. We saw a Black Latino Army lieutenant harassed and assaulted by police in Virginia. And we saw a white Army veteran assault a black man in South Carolina for walking while black. So, at this point, if you can't recognize the problem, you just don't want to see it. And if all that wasn't enough, this past week we saw a political commentator with the highest television ratings in the country. This is a man watched by tens of millions of Americans. We saw this man openly repeating white supremacist ideology, white nationalist conspiracy theories, which really are just a step away from neo-Nazi skinhead rhetoric. This is stuff that used to be confined to the fringes, like Stormfront or Breitbart. But now it's being pumped into the political bloodstream of America. This is scary stuff. This is dangerous stuff. This is the kind of dehumanizing rhetoric that provides the kindling for atrocities. And I was struggling to put my feelings into words this past week when, as often happens, I found that someone else had articulated my thoughts better than I had. So I want to quote Bradley Onishi, who is one of the two co-hosts of the podcast Straight White American Jesus. So this is a very lightly edited quote. So he said, "Why does the heaven that so many Americans are trying to create depend on the subjection to hell of so many people of African descent, indigenous people, other people of color, people in the queer community, and the trans community?" And Bradley goes on to talk about the American dream. And that very directly relates to this podcast because, of course, this podcast is called The California Dream. So there are a lot of aspects to what I would call the California Dream, but certainly one of those aspects is that the California Dream is opposed to the type of dehumanization and othering that Brad describes. This particular political commentator I'm referring to has expressed concern that America is becoming more like California. Well, I hope so, Tucker. I really hope so. So with me today is a musician, rap artist, a political activist who's been involved with Occupy Orange County, Black Lives Matter, and anti-police brutality movements, and also the recall petition of Governor Newsom. He was a 2018 Libertarian Party candidate for California governor, 2020 candidate for Fresno mayor, and 2022 current candidate for California governor. And especially pertaining to this podcast, he is a California nationalist and CalExit Congress member. Please welcome Nickolas Wildstar.
Woo-hoo.
How are you doing today?
Fantastic. Thank you for sitting down to speak with me, Darren.
Okay, great. So why don't we start off with just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of your story about how you became involved in both political activism and then eventually electoral politics, because I think that everyone who is involved in that type of thing has some kind of story. There has to be some kind of impetus where you think, I got to get up off the couch and
Right.
and become involved. So what's your background and story on that?
Well, for the past decade or so, I've been involved in political activism. Been in, a protester, involved in many rallies throughout the state, whether it be police brutality or women's rights or, mainstream media censorship or anything that pretty much the community deems to be an issue that needs to be addressed by our elected officials. I've been there on the front lines right alongside them. So just hearing those concerns and wanting that demand for change myself, and kind of like you said, going from that place as a person where I didn't want to just sit around bitching and complaining about it, excuse my language, but actually doing something about it, not feeling powerless, but enabling the, enabling the revolutionist within us all, especially here in America. We kind of all have that rebel spirit to be anti-authoritarian, anti-taxation, anti-government control. And I wanted to act on that. I mean, it was mainly fueled by the events of 9/11. I had always been kind of a person that's watched what's going on with our political world. But when 9/11 happened and I saw inconsistencies with the situation myself, like Building 7 falling, the third building that fell pancake style during 9/11, that just opened my eyes and made me question my government a bit more. So I fell down that rabbit hole, ended up learning a lot, and stumbled upon Dr. Ron Paul during the 2008 presidential election because of that. I was a big supporter of Barack Obama at that time. I had assumed, like everyone else, that he was actually going to implement that change and get Wall Street out of politics and, end occupational wars. And of course, that didn't happen. He just expanded it more. But he also, a month into his presidency, bailed out the banks instead of bailing out the people. This was when the 2008 recession was happening, and pretty much our economy was tanking. And instead of helping out the working class people of the country, he instead chose to help out the mega corporations that got him into power. So it was just a big slap in the face to me, and especially being a black man and, looking at him as a bit of an inspiration was extremely disappointing. So I didn't know that Ron Paul, of all people, was running for president against Barack Obama. He was the Libertarian candidate, and I didn't even know what the Libertarian Party was or ever heard of them. So it just opened my eyes to a whole new realm of politics. Just hearing what he was talking about, ending the Federal Reserve, ending those occupational wars, and introducing me to new stuff that I never even knew existed or possibilities through government. So that excited me to want to get involved in politics myself. So I was a big advocate of his presidency for 2012. And that was really my first time ever getting involved with a political party. Usually we just sit on the sidelines, we root for our Republican or Democratic candidates, but rarely do we ever, take up the helm to actually get involved with the party and, act as a delegate within that party to help those candidates get further. So I assumed that role during the 2012 presidential campaign for Ron Paul, and also was involved in the Occupy movement. Occupy Wall Street pretty much spread across the country and world. So out here in California, we had tons of demonstrations down in LA, Occupy LA, San Diego, Sacramento, Orange County, where I was. So I was involved in those protests as well as coordinated a few of my own during the anonymous movement, as an anonymous protester. So I arranged Million Mask March protests and, like I said, protests against mainstream media censorship and police brutality, all of these killings of unarmed civilians that happened. I did my best to, of course, make sure that I responded in some way by being there, but also by bringing attention to these issues to the public, who tend to get ignored and kind of put in the dark about the inner workings of it all and how we can truly solve the issue. So there's a lot of disparity in the community when it comes to, societal problems and them actually being dealt with in the manner to where we feel like now we can breathe. Now we don't have to worry about it. And when we don't get that type of resolve, it adds to our frustration. Now we're more aggravated because of it. We're stressed out. We have bad relationships that come as a result from this frustration that shouldn't be there at all. If we hire these people to do a specific job and they fail to do that job, it's just as simple as finding someone else to replacing them. And of course, hoping that they're better than the last one. And we see that time and time again with our political figures. And here in California, I saw the public as being more progressive, more involved, especially with the 2003 removal of Gray Davis. That was the first recall ever in the state, where we got to remove a governor that we deemed unfit for that role. We switched him with Arnold Schwarzenegger, of all people, but at least we did.
The governor.
Exactly. But we took action. The people of California took action. And that's very inspirational to, again, those people that feel like their hands are tied when it comes to wanting something different. So seeing the failures in leadership myself, not only with Schwarzenegger, but his successor then, Jerry Brown, who was a previous governor from the 80s. So you can just look at his record and it's awful. And I felt like, again, if we want to make sure that we have better representation, true elected officials that are bringing about those types of changes in our community that we want, we have to make sure that we vet them properly first and then pick from those community leaders. And that's where I kind of found my calling to step up to the plate and challenge those guys. I mean, because it's only one position as governor versus legislators and, city council members, etc. There's a multitude of them. You have to work in a group setting in order to bring about those changes. Sometimes you got to lobby the rest of the group members and, kind of sway them to get behind those ideas, opposed to where with governor, you simply just present the idea and they have to follow suit, because you're the spokesman of the majority of the people of the state. The legislators are the ones that bring that to fruition. So I saw every failure of our state falling on the governor's shoulders. And I feel like I'm the type of person that would be able to deal with them in a better manner, because I've been so involved with the people and have spoken to them one-on-one and have dealt with those type of issues myself, whether it be, shortcomings of, income due to the cost of living here in the state being so high, or, temporary homelessness. I've had to bounce around in places. I've been in jail and, arrested for nonviolent victimless crimes and prosecuted by our legal system, and saw them waste our tax dollars in the process. And with me being a longtime working class person, and being a financial contributor to our community, I want to make sure my money is spent well. I hate wasteful spending. And when we have an issue like homelessness not being addressed because you have some greedy politicians who want to instead use that money on some pet project of theirs, then how can we hold them accountable for that? 9 times out of 10, we can't. And the only option that we have is to elect them out of office. So I know that was kind of like a long-winded
that was a response. That was a great answer. No, that was a great answer.
That's why you have now Nickolas Wildstar candidate for governor.
Yeah, I think. I definitely agree with you that a lot of the people that we have, so-called representatives, are just not in touch with what ordinary people go through. And I think the last 20 years have seen this resurgence in political involvement across the spectrum. I think there was a lot of political involvement in the 60s and the 70s, and then it kind of people got kind of apathetic, I think, for a while.
Yeah.
When I was in high school and college growing up, there was just kind of a ho-hum attitude. It was either like, well, everything seems to be going well, so there's no reason to get involved, or it's all pointless anyway. Like, there's nothing we can do to change it. And so those two kind of prevailing views really were dominant for a while. And then the two major events, you hit upon one of them, was 9/11 and especially the Iraq War. That was, I think, a big eye-opener for a lot of people, especially in California. And so the other one was the 2008 financial crash, and then all the aftermath of that, and how that was dealt with. And that it kind of got another wave of people involved. So I think your story mirrors a lot of people. I know that I've become more politically engaged, maybe not in the same type of ways, but over the past 5 or 10 years. And I think it's a common story. You kind of hit at a couple things that I was planning on getting to a little bit later, but
we'll take it as we go.
Take it as we go. So could you explain specifically, now you're a candidate for governor and you've been involved in the Newsom recall petition. Could you talk a little bit about that and maybe, I don't know, dispel some myths? We were talking earlier before the broadcast about how often people who are not in the mainstream politically get misrepresented by the media, and things are not accurate. So what is your purpose for running, and what would you do differently as governor were you elected?
Absolutely. Well, respond to the people's call. Like you said, the majority of elected officials right now, they're completely out of touch with the community's issues. Gavin Newsom is a perfect example of it. I mean, with him during this pandemic, just alone, has exemplified this do as I say, not as I do type of mentality. He's going out having dinner indoors while other people aren't able to enjoy that same type of outing, and businesses are being shut down and fined because of it. Meanwhile, he had a winery or has a winery that's been open, during this pandemic. He also took taxpayers' money, a triple P loan meant to help small businesses. So it's more exemplary of this, again, kind of hypocritical way of leadership where we feel like these so-called representatives get in office. They say they want to help the middle class. They say they want to help the poor. They say they want to help our kids. And then they get in office and they don't do a damn thing about it. If anything, they start implementing policies that do the opposite and start hurting those groups of people. So it's sad that we get caught up in this dualistic way of thinking politically, where it's either red or blue, Republican or Democrat, left or right, when none of us really think that way. We're more so independent. We're more so up the middle. Sometimes we support taxes if it, can create a certain result for us. But if we don't see that result, now we don't think we should be taxed anymore. So that trend of contradictory has been continued by Governor Newsom. I pretty much saw it coming because I saw what he did in San Diego as mayor. And it's a shame that a lot of people weren't paying attention to his track record to say that, hey, if he ever gets to the position where he's running the state, then all the problems of San Francisco is pretty much going to expand to every part of our border. And it has. So seeing that happen with him, of course, it motivated me even more to want to run, which is why I have been involved in the recall effort, because what he did with AB 5, this was before the lockdown, which is basically a bill that prevents people from working as an independent contractor in the state. So that's truck drivers, that's painters, floorers, event planners like my wife. You can't work for yourself in the state. Even rideshare drivers had to kind of put pressure on elected officials to change that law so they can go back to work, but they had millions of dollars behind them thanks to Uber and Lyft to make that happen. But what about the rest of the working class? What about the accountants right now, since it's tax season? So he's killed jobs before the lockdown and then implemented one of the longest lockdowns in the entire nation to kill the job market even further. So if we want to bring back our job market and we want to bring back a strong economy and, security for the people here, then we have to get rid of them. It's just as simple as that. So I've been out for maybe 5 months during the signature gathering period to petition and get signatures to recall Newsom. I met thousands of people and gathered thousands of signatures in the process. And I was one of the leading contributors to that 2.1 million signatures that we've gathered. Right. So it's also given me an opportunity to speak with those people one-on-one as well, which I appreciate, because that gave me more insight as to why they were supporting the recall. And believe it or not, the majority of them, because where I live is predominantly a Democratic ruled area, the majority of them were Democrats and ex-Gavin Newsom supporters, or even Gavin Newsom supporters now that I was able to speak with them about certain issues like AB5 or SB 145 or the lockdowns or, everything that he's done. And they say, okay, I'll sign, So what you see in the mainstream media, him going around saying that the people involved in the recall are right-wing extremists.
Right. So I wanted to get to, So if you just look at the mainstream media, especially on like Facebook and YouTube ads that I've been getting recently, you would think that this entire thing was this was like a national outside campaign that was Donald Trump,
Right.
That the Trump campaign is coming in and wanting to do that.
God.
And
Such a lie.
First of all, you're no fan of Donald Trump.
No,
right?
I
No.
did not vote for Trump in either election. And
No.
I've been very outspoken against his policies and what he's done.
Yeah.
So, no.
So this is, So, I mean, what really happened, maybe so you can confirm this happened mostly within California, more from the ground up. And
yes,
like a lot of things that happen in politics, people come in at the last minute, the last mile of the marathon, and say they come out in front and say they take credit for this, put themselves at the front of the parade.
And sadly, that's happened with this recall effort. You're right. It was more so a grassroots effort. And the California GOP really wasn't involved. The national GOP wasn't involved and didn't cough up any funding until maybe the last 2-3 months, before the signature deadline. And that was only because we were on track to meet that signature threshold of 1.5 million. Before that, there were multiple attempts to recall Gavin Newsom before this last one. No one cared about it because no one thought it was going to happen.
And when I point this out, this is not me saying anything personally about my position on the recall or the governor's race. I'm just pointing out that you really can't trust what you see in the media about a lot of these things.
No, not at all. And it's definitely being propagandized now by the left and, the Democratic Party because they want to keep Newsom in office because he's a potential prospect for them for president. And they want to keep that good reputation for him going, not have it be tarnished in any way. So now they're collecting money to go around promoting that this is a right-wing effort, Trump supporters are involved, versus looking at the actual people and actual data. You can pull information from the Secretary of State's website, and it'll show you that the majority of people that sign that recall are registered Democrats.
Yeah, well, I think just the fact that you're going to have the signatures to go through with the recall, I think that's going to damage him enough for national.
Oh, yeah.
I know that's just I don't think the recall even has to be successful. I think just the fact that there would be a recall election is going to tarnish his chances for whatever national office he's thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's your first term in office, and you've had, over a handful of efforts to recall you and get you out of office. And it has nothing to do with political party affiliation. It has everything to do with his leadership and what he's done to change the policies in the state of California to harm the people that live here. That's it. And if people really focused on the details, they would find that out instead of believing, this kind of blanket narrative being created by the mainstream media, which is all controlled. I mean, if you look at LA Times and Sacramento Bee owning Fresno Bee and all of these other liberal publications, they're pretty much all owned by the same group of people. And same with the conservative, outlets as well. So we have to break free from being dependent upon them for the truth, So hopefully people listening to this podcast right now will come to you for more information opposed to turning CNN, Fox News, etc.
Yeah, I do watch CNN and Fox and MSNBC, but more just for either for entertainment or just
That's all it's
just
good for.
that's all it's entertainment, or to get a finger on the pulse of what is passing for
Yes.
conventional thought. So I was looking at your Fresno mayor webpage,
All right.
and there's some interesting things there. I mean, I I wasn't aware of. So you have a whole section on homelessness, and one of the topics that, or one of the policies that you were advocating in your mayoral run is so let me read just part of it. As mayor, I would like to use currently undeveloped city land to create communities where we can efficiently install affordable and suitable tiny 3D printed tiny houses to be able to give people a roof over their heads without a burdensome cost to taxpayers and a stronger chance to begin taking steps to improve their own lives. So I thought that was really interesting. I've never really heard of that type of policy
All
or
right.
solution before. Could you maybe talk about that? Is that something that you would be interested in promoting at the state level?
Absolutely, I have. I did so when I was the 2018 Libertarian candidate for governor. I did so when I was the 2018 City Council candidate for Fullerton and Fresno mayor, and I'm doing so now for governor as well. These 3D printed homes can be built in less than 24 hours for less than $5,000 each, and they're self sustainable. So it's kind of like a one and done type of deal. And by using this highly advanced technology, you're going to be improving the neighborhoods that they're being built in. You're going to be raising property value just by creating these type of homes, and it's actually being used right now in the commercial real estate industry in Rancho Mirage, of all places. They're building a community, spending, I believe, over $100 million to build an entire community of these 3D printed homes out there.
I think I saw a Guardian article on that. But just to be clear, those are like 2,500 square foot. I mean, these are expensive upper middle class homes. Those are not. Those are not home. Those are not tiny.
Exactly. Well, the homes that I'm talking about, they're more so like one bedroom, one bath. Some of them come equipped with 2 bedrooms. So it's enough to take care of, an individual or a small family, but it would be temporary housing for those in need. It's not a permanent solution, because the majority of people that are out there on the streets are out there because of some unfortunate situation. It's not because they want to be, a great majority of them have jobs. So they're working, living on the street,
I've known
their car, out of hotels,
Yes, I've known people who are working who are homeless before.
Exactly. So it's not like they don't have a source of income. They just don't have a roof over their head. So if you gave them that opportunity, now they can put some money in their pocket and hopefully invest into one of those larger 3D printed properties that you're talking about. But it's sad that this technology isn't being used to address our housing crisis here in the state, opposed to being used as a money-making venture, by these major real estate corporations. So that's one of my proposals. And also to start building earth ships. These are another self-sustainable type of home that's actually built out of recycled materials. So you take beer cans and, bottles and tires. You can take all of this waste, use it to actually build these homes. And they exist also. They have, I believe, ever since the 90s. There's an entire city in Taos, New Mexico, where the architect that created these homes built the community himself. So it's a way for us to clean up the landfills, clean up our environment, while also providing these high-tech homes for those in need.
Great. So I also see, so you had this section on Fresno First Initiative. And again, when I'm looking at this, if I was just looking at the policies and I didn't know anything about, you didn't tell me anything about who the candidate was or their background or their political philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
I actually see a lot of things here that are appealing to me.
All right.
So you have transportation. You talk about high quality, affordable public transit, expanding bike lanes and sidewalks, bike and scooter programs, metro system for energy. You want energy independence as opposed to PG&E.
Right.
Talk about public banking, beautification. What was this Fresno First initiative? What was the general idea behind it? And again, would that apply at the state level, or how would it translate at the state level?
Absolutely. Well, I moved to Central Valley here in Fresno about 2 years ago, and learned a lot about the area in a short amount of time. The drought situation, the lack of public roads and sidewalks, the rolling blackouts, and faulty equipment from PG&E that was the source of a lot of wildfires in the area. It just brought all of this to attention, and I had to come up with a way of kind of solving it all. And that's how I came up with the Fresno First Initiative, which I've now rebranded as my Gold New Deal. And that's what I'm offering to do as governor for the state of California, is implement the Gold New Deal and make the Golden State greater than ever before. And that's by creating energy independence, where we have a state-owned utility that's not PG&E, that's not SoCal Edison. If anything, I would probably even ban them from the state for criminal activity and use, eminent domain to take over their power facilities and use them ourselves. But this would create a create an energy source based off of renewable energies, and whether it's solar, water, wind, whatever the case may be, shift to that type of collection for power, as well as start using atmospheric water generators to create water. These are machines that can literally create water out of thin air. And if we actually had a utility company that utilized this technology, then now the people of California are receiving services that are more efficient, that are more affordable. And if anything, they'd be getting them for free since they use their tax dollars to pay for them. So if the people of California want to have free water and power, definitely vote Wildstar for governor. Also, with the Gold New Deal, I want to create a People's Bank of California. You have a cannabis industry here in the state that's able to do banking with the major banks because of federal policy. If we had a state bank, then now those businesses that are mainly cash handlers are now able to safely put that money in a place like a bank, Bank of California, and the people of the state would benefit from that. Now we have an opportunity for those small business loan seekers to now have an opportunity to receive that, since they're majority of the time rejected by the major banks, or they come with high interest rates instead of one that would have zero interest with the People's Bank of California. It would also do banking in crypto and precious metals, which banks don't do at all right now. So it's just opening up our financial tech industry as well. And of course, with the high-speed rail that was supposedly, going to be built but hasn't been built yet, it's been another black hole for taxpayers' money. Invest that better. Give up the contract for that to Tesla or Virgin, who's building a hyperloop out there in Nevada. So we give up the contracts of control, give it to these free market industries. Now we have development of these services, and it's not coming out of taxpayers' pockets. We also want to make sure that we're beautifying our state and cleaning it up and growing more trees so we can have, a cleaner air quality as well. So this all falls under my Gold New Deal, which if your listeners out there, if you visit my website, wildstar2022.com, you can find more about.
Okay, great. So I think this is a good point to take a short break. And when we return, I want to go a little bit more into what this podcast is concerned with, which is California issues and its relationship to the federal government and CalExit and those types of issues. So we'll be back in just a moment. So we are back with Nickolas Wildstar, who is 2022 candidate for California governor. And what I wanted to talk with you about now after the break is we're both in this independence movement or CalExit movement, which is promoting this conversation about California and its relationship to the federal government and whether we would be better off kind of running our own affairs. Can you talk about first of all, how did you become acquainted with the idea of California independence and CalExit, and why you think that it's a good conversation that we should be having? So why you think it's not a far out, crazy idea, and and just how you came to think about this.
Sure. Well, a lot of people don't realize California is one of the largest economies in the entire world. I think it's like fifth or sixth just on its own. You have the United States, this part of it, but the state of California is one of the largest economies in the world. So we generate a lot of income here in the state, a lot of revenue. We create a lot of different products and industries that are focused here. This is the home of it. So when it comes to innovation and being a leader among the community, California stands above the rest. So if we take that power, that economic power that we have, and actually hone in on what we're doing right, what would be the possibility then? Would we be able to creep up that economic ladder and possibly become number one? Yes, indeed. How would that happen? Well, first, stop sending so much money to the federal government and stop letting them take so much of your money through federal taxation. And that's what's happening right now. California is a donor state where we loan more to the federal government than we borrow. So that's why you have schools and hospitals that are better in other states opposed to here in California. Why is it so bad? Why do we have one of the nation's highest homeless populations when we're so wealthy? It's because we're not spending that money to address the issues here at home. So that's my goal as governor, is to use that money here at home, focus on improving our way of life here in the state first and foremost, and show people how us not living indebted to the federal government is going to put us in a better position financially, to where now our independence comes naturally, where every state in the union is independent on its own. We're all sovereign states in the sovereign nation, but we don't behave that way. If we started to focus on California first, then now we put ourselves in a better position to help people in other states or across the world. I first became introduced to the idea of secession, I would say, during my 2018 campaign for governor. I learned about the Jefferson State Project, which is basically over half of the state's counties wanting to create its own state, its own 51st state. And I'm supportive of that. I supported the 7 states, California, where they wanted to break it up. I think it was Tim Draper, the CEO of Overstock. He wanted to break up the state and make it to where it was different territories in multiple states. I supported that. And I hear a lot of people say California is just ungovernable and, it's difficult to manage. If it's smaller, that would make it a lot easier, wouldn't it? So I support it as governor to make my job easier. Of course, I would do everything in my power to change the policies of the state so we will want to stay connected and one body. But if we chose to, again, create different territories, different regions, nothing's going to change about their location geologically. It's just going to be a difference in policy, a different border of where California starts and ends. And that's simply it. The trade relationships would remain the same. People would still have jobs in certain cities or counties or whatever, and still would be able to travel there. And we could probably improve the road conditions to make that commute for them even better. But it starts first with us thinking about that possibility, opposed to just leaning on the fact that we're being propped up by the federal government, and by being part of the union benefits us. How does it benefit us when they're pretty much playing a role as a parent, telling their child, their grown child, what they can and can't do with their life? That's what it feels like.
Yeah, it feels like we're like the 35-year-old at home, where they're still, we have a job and we're running our own affairs, and they're like, no, you have to come home at 10 p.m. Why are you wearing that shirt? That makes you look bad.
The guy from SNL, he lives in his mom's basement. Yeah, Pete Davidson. He's like a millionaire, but he's living in his mom's basement, and he had to move out because he had some stalkers, and now he's preventing, causing a threat to his mom's safety. And you don't want to put his mom in danger, so he's going to move out on his own. And I think California should do the same thing. If we don't want to put the federal government in danger, or for it to put us in danger, then we need to make sure that we have our own place to call home. And right now, with what's happening with the federal government, not only this administration, but the previous one and the previous one and the previous one, is they've continued to put the people of this country in harm's way, whether it's getting involved in foreign wars, covert or openly, is threatening the people here in the state. We saw that with the recent killing out there in Colorado. This guy was from Syria, and just so coincidentally, we have a president that attacked Syria recently. You had the killing of George Floyd happen in Minnesota due to Derek Chauvin, who's now on trial. But those policies and inaction by the Department of Defense puts us in harm's way, because now we have people in California seeing that, responding to that, protesting against that. And it's again threatening the people in our own backyard. So if we remove ourselves from federal issues, then now we can live stress free from them. And we can just focus on our own problems here first and improving the life conditions here instead of taking on the responsibility of those elsewhere.
Yeah, it just feels like we've moved on in a lot of ways, in the ways that the country hasn't in
Right.
general. I mean, we're it seems like the country is still trying to deal with being a multiracial democracy. They haven't come to terms with that. Whereas here, we are multiracial. I mean, whites are a minority. That we're not. It's there is no
Right.
majority group in California. It's been that way for quite a while, and it's just normal. And the United States seems to still have a problem with that.
It
So
does. It's struggling terribly with it, you know?
yeah,
But California, right, is a perfect example of the melting pot that is America. You know, it's this mixed bag of
right.
everybody from different cultures, different ethnicities, international type of
Hmm.
relationships, as well. So we need to utilize that to our best advantage. We even got rid of our first governor because he was racist. He was the first governor, and he ended up, retiring early because the people of California didn't want him and his policies to spread among the state. So, we have that lobbying power.
I think the issue, whether you're coming from your viewpoint, your political philosophy, or mine, which is more on the left, is that it's a matter of representation. Um, that we don't really have a voice or representation within the federal system
Right.
compared to our population, compared to our economy, the size of our economy, compared to what we contribute to the country. I mean, if you just the fact that we have two senators
I know.
is just
It's just absurd.
is ridiculous. And also, I think that it's not just a matter of that we're not really represented at the federal level, but I think it kind of the national politics kind of distorts what happens in California.
Right.
If that does that make sense? I don't know.
Absolutely. That's what I was talking about with the, foreign wars and, uh,
Well, it even just from a purely kind of political party sense. So, um, for instance, the fact that we're in the federal system means that we're pretty much dominated by the two national parties, the Democrats and Republicans,
right.
because national politics is such a big part of our politics. But then that ends up affecting the state politics. So what do you have? The state ends up having these two major political parties, and then that kind of monopoly on political representation filters down to the state
Right.
and distorts what happens in the state. And I think neither of us are real big fans of either Democratic or Republican Party.
No.
Probably the love that we have between the two of us for both of them fits on the head of a pin.
Absolutely. Well, yeah.
So, and I think if we were more in charge of our own affairs, it would open up representation within the state, even because I could see that if we had more, I don't know, if we had some reforms like ranked choice voting and more proportional representation, some of these um, there's a divergence of viewpoints in the state, and they would have more representation. So I could see, for instance, um, you know, libertarian a party or libertarian political group garnering 10 to 15% of the vote. I could see, like a hardcore socialist group in 10 to 15%. There would probably be two major political groups. One, I would say, like a centrist Democrat, like the Nancy Pelosi, Gavin Newsom kind of, they would probably be one major. There'd be more of a more progressive, Bernie Sanders style party. But there would also be a libertarian. There would be green. There would be, um, other groups, it would just allow for more representation. Whereas now it's just this single party. And I'm not saying that. I guess I would rather, compared to between the Democrats and Republican, I would rather be under single party Democrat than single party Republican. But still, it's single party. And if you want any way into the state, any way into getting anything done in the states, like you have to go through that. If you're on the left, you have to go through the Democratic Party. So people who are, more, my persuasion closer to like a Bernie Sanders style, we constantly fighting against, the Democratic Party to try and influence it and do it. And, they're resistant to change. So I think that, if we were, our own nation, we're free of this monopoly by the two parties. It would just allow for better representation, and it'd be more democratic just in general.
Yeah, I mean, we are a nation state. Gavin Newsom has said that himself. And I mean, when he first imposed the lockdowns, that was his argument against Donald Trump and the federal government, was to say, hey, California is a nation state and we will do what we need to, first and foremost. It's sad that we kind of have let this fascist political system overtake our country. Because like you said, it's two major parties that have monopolized our political system, whether it be on the federal, national level or on the local level. We seem to only be forced to choose between the two. So political reform to me as governor would be implementing ranked choice voting, which was actually a bill that Democratic legislators pushed and put on a bill on Gavin Newsom's desk, which he vetoed. Why? Because that would create an opportunity for him to be challenged. They don't want that. The superpowers want to stay in power, and they don't want any threat of that power to have an opportunity to be presented. So he just knocked it off the table, vetoed it completely. But yes, ranked choice voting would be a better way. That way, instead of people feeling like they must vote candidate A or B, they get to vote for all of the candidates and just simply rank them on which one they like from least to the most likable, whatever. And the one with the highest ranking wins. That creates better opportunities for us to see different political philosophies actually at play. And we have term limits because of that. So you get 4 years to, showcase your ideas. And if they suck, you're fired. And we'll switch it out and hire someone else. But with these elitist politicians, they're pretty much who they are.
I like you were going to say another word.
I'll refrain. But yeah, they are professional politicians, and they are a small group of people. They tend to only want to help themselves. Even with Bernie Sanders, he's supportive of this infrastructure plan that Joe Biden proposed, which is going to add trillions of dollars to our debt. It's not going to help out the working class. It's not going to help out the people that are struggling to pay their bills right now or send their kids to school or keep food on their table. How is that going to help them? It's not at all. When it comes to our border, you had Kamala Harris, of all people now, come out and back Gavin Newsom and endorse him as governor. But she has done nothing to address the issue of the immigrants at our border, neither has AOC or anybody like that. So they're picking and choosing these issues based on the election year, and if it promotes their campaign to get reelected, then they're going to do everything in their power to use that issue to promote themselves instead of addressing it, solving it, and alleviating the problem altogether. But doing so would also show that they're pretty much not needed. It would dissolve their position of power. And again, they don't want that.
Well, we'll come back to the national debt center. That's one of the so Yeah, I'm gonna hook you up with some MMT material sometime. But
Right, I'll take it.
that's another conversation for another day. That's so yeah. I think our major disagreement, as far as political philosophy, we agree on most things. We disagree on economics. So like I think we do agree on things like drug policy, civil liberties, immigration, criminal justice reform, unchecked executive power at the presidential level, minority rights. I think we both agree Trump and his ideology is a authoritarian threat and everything. But I just want to point out, just for everybody, that that it is kind of striking to me that that people who do have legitimate kind of fundamental disagreements about political philosophy and economics still have come to the similar kind of conclusion, uh, at least as far as this question about what should happen. And to me, it's just a matter of representation and having a voice in what is happening in your own community.
Right.
Whether that's the local community or whether it's the state of California, that's just not happening now. And I'm just so tired of feeling like we have our needs, we have our issues, and we're just constantly banging up against this, Mitch McConnell, and
Right.
the structure of the legislative branch at the federal level is just designed to just stop anything. It's just like and so I just feel like we're being told by these people from 3,000 miles away who don't, I mean, it's hard to explain for people that, if there's Americans listening, and actually most of my audience from the stats are actually international. So, but for people outside of the state, who are Americans listening, just how much of it, there's a geographic divide. Like there's the Sierra Nevada mountains, the Rocky Mountains. I mean, it's hard to convey like how distant the East Coast and like the Washington area, New York.
Right.
That seems like it's a long way away for me. I don't feel connected to that part of the country. I don't feel like I'm connected to the concerns of people over there. And it's then these institutions that are run by people who are elected by a small group of people who live that far away, just telling us how we're supposed to decide what to do.
Exactly.
And
nor are we collected. It's like having a long distance relationship.
Yes, it's like having a long distance relationship where you're getting text messages and calls all the time telling you when you can leave the house.
Yeah. And everything's okay. You're like, can we talk at least? Do you have
talk at least? No.
Nope, but send me some money,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's awful that we do have kind of these dictators, really, that live afar, and they tell us what we can do with our own money, with our own bodies, with our own property, with our own everything. And
yeah,
the best way to stand up to that is to pretty much just declare your independence, and we've come to that moment here in California where a lot of people, again, are feeling fearful of what the federal government has done to the state and the threat they pose. So what are we going to do about it? We have to act now. We have to stand up. We have to come together unified and refuse all of these federal policies that are overruling.
Yeah. And I'm not, how do I say this? I am a believer that government has a role to play in improving people's lives and being a part of the economy. But I have been persuaded, I think, recently that there are certain limits to the scale of where that can occur. So in other words, I'm starting to question how possible that is on a scale of like 350 million people spread out over an entire continent, over the geographical differences and all the. I'm just not sure that it works at that scale. I mean, we started off as a small country on just these colonies on the East Coast, and gradually the country kept growing. And I just think it works better at a smaller scale.
Right.
That doesn't mean I'm a that sounds like a very libertarian thing.
I was going to say.
And I don't think I'm in favor of we go down to the like the city level or the block level. But I think the current national federal level we have, I would agree with it. It's to me it's just too big to work out. And
Right.
so I think I would rather be having these honest political disagreements about policy and economics and things like that with people who at least share a common, like you live in the same area, you have some connection. It doesn't make sense to me to have these political fights with people that you don't really have much in common with.
Right.
So I'm not saying that we all have to agree, and definitely there's a lot of people in the Calixa movement who don't agree on every policy and everything. But at least let's have those disagreements here at home. Let's have them, let's have them amongst each other, where we're all in the same boat. We're all going to be affected by them, and we're all going to have to live with the consequences, rather than having this kind of outside institutions that make decisions where they're not invested in the. I feel like the decisions are being made by people that really don't have to live with the consequences, and don't have to that they don't have to suffer repercussions of the decisions that they make.
The fact of the matter is that the government is supposed to be a lot smaller than it is. And that's mainly what libertarians advocate for, is just minimizing government to its book of rules, which is the Constitution. Right now, we have a government that's acting unconstitutionally. It violates our, Bill of Rights, or rights listed under the Bill of Rights all of the time. You had a president right now, Joe Biden, who says the amendments are not absolute. So they apparently don't take that rule book that limits their authority, their power, seriously. So we need to start making sure that we hold them accountable to say, hey, you're acting outside of your authority right now. And because of that, we're now going to take away that power from you. We have a governor right now who's been imposing these lockdowns on us out of emergency powers. But how long does that last? Is it 10 days? Is it 100 days? Is it 5 years? Whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't be able to exact that type of authority for an indefinite amount of time. But that's what's happening right now. So if anything, that's what we want to do with pushing for California independence, is minimizing the effect that the federal government has on us on the street level, as well as the state government, because their power is out of control as well. I did want to ask you, what you mean we different on economics? Because you're going to.
Well, I am so I am on economics. I am more kind of a Bernie-crat, and also I subscribe to, I subscribe to a branch of economics that's become kind of prominent in the media in the past few years, modern monetary theory, which has a kind of turns around a lot of different ways that people conceive of money and spending and taxation. It turns a lot of it on its head, which caused me to reevaluate a lot of things. I think I pretty much subscribe to the conventional thinking about money up until about 5 years ago, and then I started, questioning a lot of things about how currency works and things like that. And
mm-hmm.
it it really changes, at least for me, it changed the way I viewed a lot of the questions. You start to look at it's questioning fundamental assumptions. When you question fundamental assumptions, it's difficult to look at conversations that people are having. So like I'll look at debates that people are having about policy and stuff, and I find myself not agreeing with either of them, because I'm like saying, well, yeah, you're disagreeing with each other, but you're agreeing on the same assumptions.
Right, which is,
and so if I don't agree with those assumptions, I don't identify with either of you.
yeah.
So the way, for instance, the very common kind of political debates about the economy at the federal level is, there's one side that says, well, we need to cut spending and cut, taxes because we want to free up the private market to, unleash innovation. And, we think there should be minimal government intervention and so on. And then there's other side that says, no, the government needs to intervene in the economy. It needs to tax money so it can redistribute, and, it needs to take, tax money from the taxpayers and distribute that tax money to everybody else. I don't agree with either of those.
Right.
Because to me, they're both sharing fundamental assumptions about how taxation and spending works that I don't think are accurate.
Right. I'm agreeing. I agree with you there. I don't support taxation at all. I think it's a bit outdated for us to believe that taxing ourselves is going to make our economic situation better. I forgot who said, I think it's Winston Churchill. He said taxing yourself is like, standing in a bucket and trying to pull yourself up out of it. It's not going to happen, so.
Well, yes. So the MMT viewpoint on taxation is so I didn't know we were going to get into this kind of in the last bit of the interview, but we can spend a little bit of time on it. The MMT view of taxation is fundamentally different, at least at the federal level. So it views the role. Most people, if you ask like 9 out of 10 people or 99 out of 100, you ask them, why does the federal government tax? They would say
the roads.
Well, but the overall answer would be, well, to get money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that the government has money to spend on social programs and infrastructure and whatever.
Right.
Right. That's probably what 99 out of 100 people or 9 out of 10 people would say. And the MMT point has a completely different viewpoint. Its view is that taxation is a method to drive the currency, to drive the value of the currency, and it's not really a method of financing.
Right.
In other words, the currency issuer doesn't need your money. They don't tax so that they can get your money. They need you. They tax so that you have a need to get the money to give them.
Exactly. And
so it's not a matter. So the taxation is not a matter of getting money so that it can spend. They can spend on what they want, but the taxation is a way to drive the currency, to enact certain, to address things like wealth inequality and income inequality, and also to like if you want to incentivize certain behaviors and other ones. But it's not a financing. So this constant,
right.
This constant battle over how you're going to pay for it and where you're going to find the money to do this becomes you start to see like this doesn't make much sense as an argument.
Right.
So it's
that's the funny part, because if you ask people where money comes from, they don't know that it comes from the Federal Reserve, and they just hit print and create that money out of thin air.
Well, yeah. So yes. So and I don't want to get into the Federal Reserve too much, but yeah, you're correct. So MMT's viewpoint is that money is a creation of legal and political institutions, that it's a social relation, and that yes, money is created essentially out of thin air. So at the moment when Congress spends, they pass a bill to vote on something. They send instructions to the Federal Reserve, and it's Excel spreadsheets. They type numbers into Excel spreadsheets, and that's where the money comes from. So you were talking about, the national debt and something. So, from my viewpoint, the national debt is not so much an issue because the federal government doesn't really borrow money from anybody. Now, you might think that they borrow from the Federal Reserve, but I would take issue with that. But the national debt is kind of just outstanding treasuries that people hold, and the national debt has been increasing for decades, hundreds of years, and it's never led to hyperinflation and stuff. So
wait for it. I say
wait for it.
Any day now, especially with these $1 trillion bailout packages. I mean, the currency is definitely more devalued than we think. Even China right now, they just created a cryptocurrency for the country that they're now using. So if they move away from using the American dollar, like it looks like they're going to do, and Russia and other countries that are using the American dollar as the petrodollar to really prop up the value of it here in the country, then our money is going to, bottom out even more than where it is now, which is why California independence is even more important, because if we want to protect ourselves financially, and we have all of these resources to actually create a currency that has value, that's backed by something, whether it's gold or silver or water or whatever the case may be, is backed by something, has some value, versus our dollar right now, which is backed by debt and nothing but. So creating.
Well, I would say it's backed by taxation.
So. Yes, exactly. Which is the people. We dig ourselves into that.
Yeah.
So creating state currency is a goal for me, as well as moving to non-taxpayer generated revenue streams, like, leasing off some of our highways, our state highways, to some of these large corporations like Verizon or, Apple or Amazon or whatever the case may be. So instead of spending $100 million of our money to maintain these roads, we could be making $100 million in revenue from these companies that are paying us, and they would also maintain the road. So we would get a better, a better roadway system because of it, and we'd actually be making money because of it. So none of that money now is coming out of taxpayers' pockets. So it's a shift, and it does happen first with.
So one reason that I really started thinking about California independence was from an MMT viewpoint. Taxes do fund spending for California. So California as a state does need to tax to get money to spend. Because California it's not the currency issuer. It doesn't create the currency.
Right.
And so what that means is you're really dependent on the federal government spending. You can't just say, well, we want to do this. We want to mobilize these resources, and we want to spend on this, because you're constantly having to play this budget game,
right?
And you're dependent. If the federal government says, we're not going to spend on you, we're going to withhold money from you, then you're kind of out of luck. And if you're independent, you have control over you have a lot more fiscal space and fiscal independence, because you're going to be issuing your own currency, and that's really, what I thought about for quite a while when I was thinking about this, that as long as we're in the federal system, we don't really have that kind of control over our money and our spending. We're not going to get out of this kind of rut that we're in.
Right. I agree with you there. That's why.
Okay. Okay. So maybe. Okay. So, well, I want to thank you for coming on, and can you, as we close out, maybe do you have any last comments or words that you want to leave people, and also where they can find out more about your campaign and more about you?
Yes, indeed. Please visit my website, wildstar2022.com. That's wild like an animal, star like in the sky, 2022.com. That's my official campaign website. So if you'd like to find out more about what I'm proposing to do for the state of California, or would like to join Team Wildstar to help me bring that to fruition, please definitely visit my website today. I'm a grassroots candidate. I am funded, 100% funded by we the people. So please make a contribution because every bit of it helps. And with the major corporations definitely going to spend, tens of millions of dollars, if not more, on this special election, then we want to make sure that we're able to challenge them on their level. So please make a contribution or get involved with the campaign or tell others. That's really what helps as well. Name recognition. That's what's going to get me elected. So tell as many people as you can about me, about my campaign. Try to convince them to even vote for me. But I would say even more so also talk to them about the reasons why we should demand better leadership in our state, and support the recall of Gavin Newsom. That's going to help out everyone here. Even if I'm not elected, that'll at least give us a few years before the 2022 gubernatorial election to see something different and try something different, before the effects of Newsom really take a stronghold. So please support the recall for Gavin Newsom and my candidacy to replace him as the next governor of the state.
Okay, great. Well, I want to, again, thank you for coming on, and good luck with your campaign in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.